Alright guys, it's Hank here. It's tough coming through this complex. I learned a lot of lessons in agony. I'm going to show you guys real quick why that is. Okay, this is the mod that I'm using, Pack Attack NPC Edition. So anything that's labeled in my playlist PANPC is going to have this enhanced AI. So they basically have different combat profiles depending on what type of enemy that it is. So raiders are going to act a little bit differently than gunners. Gunners are going to be different than Minutemen. I think you get the point. Raiders, if they're on drugs, can typically be pretty aggressive. Otherwise, they have a tendency to stay towards their allies. Gunners will definitely use team tactics, concentrated fire, cover. They love to outflank. They use a variety of different methods to attack you that makes them extremely dangerous enemies. That with coupled with their body armor and extreme accuracy. They're very accurate fighters. Makes gunners very, very dangerous. Synths are extremely perceptive. Even if you have muffled armor and something that's going to boost your agility and things of that nature, they can still detect you. And because they are so perceptive, they carry, and coupled with the fact that they carry energy weapons that are typically automatic or enhanced in some way, they're going to cut through your armor. They're just going to burn right through you. And they're really not going to miss if you have to fight them head on. I mean, even if you've got partial cover, or even fighting, if you've got the high ground, they can still hit you very, very accurately over and over and over again. Super mutants are extremely dangerous to run into because they regenerate. So you really have to perforate them with 308 rounds or 7.62 millimeter. I will not engage super mutants with anything really less than 7.62 millimeter, and that's at probably about 600 foundation units. Up to 1,000 foundation units, they can be headshotted with a 308 caliber that has enough power. So most sniper rifles can handle that shot. And with better locational damage and agony. If they're helmeted, maybe not. Once you start to get past 1,000 foundation units, the power of a 308, even coming out of a sniper rifle, starts to diminish. So it's always kind of a risk if you're shooting over 1,000 foundation units at the head of a super mutant. And you can't be 100% certain that your headshot's going to bring it down past 100. But I'll go all, or 1,000. I'll go all the way to 1,600 foundation units to headshot super mutants just to test it. Now the dog wolf, basically this means they want to swarm you, attack you from different angles, and they like to cripple you. Mirelurks are going to want to come and attack you pretty much head on and cripple you with their claws. I mean, pretty much one good swipe from their claw is going to basically cripple one of your extremities, one of your arms. The owl guy is pretty interesting insofar as that it's a creature that has enough size not to suffer knockback from a shotgun. Certain weapons in agony and better locational damage have knockback. So the best example of this is the shotgun, 12 gauge. But it came as quite a shock to me one day when I didn't stagger the Yao guy when I shot it point blank with a shotgun, because it's too large. So you need to bear that in mind if you're using knockback. That's why I love a shotgun inside of close ranges and inside of buildings, because if I encounter something an enemy on the stairs and I'm able to hit them with the shotgun, that's going to give me enough time. They're going to be staggered, they're going to have knockback, they potentially could fall down, and that's going to keep them from retaliating with automatic fire. Because if you run into an enemy in close quarters, like on a stairwell, for example, and they're able to get off a few rounds before you're able to drop them, that's going to cause a lot of damage and potentially even death, especially if they're carrying something like an automatic Chinese assault rifle with a hardened barrel, or a hardened receiver, or a handmade rifle in 7.62 millimeter. So triggermen are interesting if they're ghouls, because ghouls are resistant to all sorts of body shots, and it's like you could pump a lot of rounds into their center mass, even 5.56, 7.62, and not drop them. You can cripple their limbs, so it's always a good idea to shoot them in the leg if you have a lot of them advancing on you. But headshots are really the only way to effectively bring down ghouls. So that makes the ghoul triggerman much more dangerous than usual. Because even though triggermen are not armored, they carry those automatic machine guns, those submachine guns in .45 caliber, and they're pretty accurate with them. They also are pretty bold, and they have pretty good accuracy. Coursers, I haven't run into any of those yet. So now, see, what the aim stability modifier means is they're basically their aim accuracy is better than vanilla, and even better than the typical pack attack, where the default is 1.2. So I'll leave it at that. So that basically means they're 120% accurate, or 20% more accurate than vanilla, coupled with their profile. So that does make all of the enemies much more accurate in the way that they use their weapons. Now, as far as command goes, this is where they have a leader, and if their leader is still alive, it's like the strongest raider, the strongest gunner, the highest level. It will give basically the ability for that enemy character to command other raiders or gunners. See, raiders don't do team tactics very well, but enemies like gunners definitely do. So that courage modifier is important, because that's what is required for that gunner leader, or whoever the leader of the enemy party is, to focus fire on you or your ally, or perhaps something else that might be in the environment. I enabled revenge. I like that a lot, and I've given a lot of courage boost, because when raiders use that psycho, they're 140% more likely to charge you on top of the profile base. So you can see where I've scaled it up from the default, so it's much more likely that they're going to go after you once they do those drugs. And if you kill their friends or whatever, they're less likely. If they're on drugs, they're less likely to retreat. They're going to want to come directly after you, despite the fact that you might be using something like an automatic machine gun, a light machine gun, or something of that nature, where it's really not in their best interest to charge you. But if they're high on psycho, they can take some damage. Of course, the enemies can also heal each other, but I'm not giving them any extra stim packs. This is most common with enemies like gunners. Not common at all with raiders. They don't help each other. Not as far as I've seen. I've set it up so they can ambush, and they're going to ambush at beyond the typical scan range. So it's beyond my visible range by another 60%, so 160% of the maximum scan range that they would ordinarily have a detection rate, depending on what type of what level the enemy is, what type of character it is, whether it's a gunner, raider, a synth. Synths have an incredibly large detection range because they're so perceptive, and then gunners are a bit more perceptive, and raiders are the least perceptive. So even 60% beyond that maximum scan range, they can set up ambushes. I have it so they can call for reinforcements. This will typically happen outside, and if they call in reinforcements, they'll get 3 per character that can actually call in reinforcements. So if you don't eliminate your opposition quickly, you could have a whole lot more enemies rolling down on top of you. So it's important to bear in mind. Feral, the high awareness range, I brought it a little bit lower than default. So if they're in groups, it's 70% of their scan range, which is still plenty for ghouls. Super mutants, as I said earlier, I've enabled the additional resistances and their regeneration. So they actually have, radiation resistance. So gamma grenades are not going to work very effectively against them. They're going to have a little bit of natural toughness, natural damage resistance to bullets and energy weapons. I brought the spawn odds of the suicider clones down to 20% instead of 50%, because we just don't need that many charging super mutants with mini nukes running around. It's just, I figure 20% is more than fair. And then I, of course, brought the pulse explosion down lower than 30%, because that, again, too, is something that you need to watch out for. I'd like to be able to watch out for it, be surprised by it, but I don't want, a 30% chance of every synth that I drop explode on me. Minimum courage modifiers, so it scales the minimum courage level, and this is again for like reinforcements and command. So I've kind of expanded the ranges. So I've brought the minimum to 70% and maximum to 130%. So I've got a 50% swing, larger than default. Minimum pack strength modifier. Enemy weapon bravery modifier. This is, like, as you can see there, higher values mean that all non-player characters are more generally more brave in the face of guns. So I've just left that at default. Power armor, the same, left it at default. Their area scanning, I've left it at default. The battle buddy odds modifier, I'm going to bring this back down to default, because I noticed when I was going through latent towers that the raiders were actually sticking together a little bit more than usual by a large degree, by well beyond what I thought the impact would be on their profile. So I'm actually going to bring that down to 9 and leave these. And then their attention span modifier, bring that down just a little bit lower, so they don't have to take as much time to make or change decisions. And I've scaled the detection event noise modifier down to 70%, because the profiles are adding more perception to a lot of different characters. and we are playing with agony, better locational damage, and clearly this better explosives and improved AI. So it's it's not bad to have half a chance of survival indoors. So okay, so we do have randomly spawning raiding parties. So I've actually brought this up from default. So there's actually a 35% chance that raiding non-player characters are going to spawn in areas that they dominate. This kind of forces me to make decisions about whether or not I want to clear a building or clear an area to bring that area or to remove that enemy control of that area, so I reduce the chance of having those raiding parties spawn. I always like the idea that I'm going to be ambushed, or I always like to have that little bit of fear, that sort of Damocles hanging above me, to make the game ultra realistic, ultra immersive, so I can't predict where the enemies are going to be. They can even spawn in neutral areas at a 25% chance, but I did not want them to spawn in out of territory because I don't want them interacting with other factions and basically killing each other off unless they run, into each other in neutral ground, or one raiding party might stumble into another faction-dominated area. But I didn't want anything that was going to break the game mechanic, or have them spawn inside of enemy camps and things like that, and remove the challenge for me. Spawn intervals every 4 hours, and they're going to spawn, so one here, it says approximately 1,500 to 3,000 U. So what that means is foundation units, and what I mean by foundation units is the typical 4x4 when you're in the build menu foundation unit. So they're going to actually spawn beyond 3,000, so between 1,500 and 3,000. So I would say I would have to get a more exact number on that, because if one is approximately 1,500 to 3,000, that's a difference of 100% of the base value. So, and then raiding party spawn count 3. It will spawn 3, but those 3 can also spawn clones. So that's the important thing to remember. It's base spawning 3, but it could be many more than that. So they're going to spawn outdoors, and these again are the what I was just talking about as far as them spawning a clone. And I'm not going to belabor the point and go into it too much, because I'm already getting on about 16 minutes explaining this stuff. But you can see where they'll spawn boss level clones, higher level clones, slightly tougher, slightly weaker. No additional spawns on interiors, because I don't want it breaking the mechanic until after a sufficient amount of buildings I've cleared in the game. I'll cut them back on. No extra spawns by race, and of course I have to have it compatible with sim settlements. So, alright, let's get down to business.
Hey.
We're at the top of Back Bay, south of our objective, and we're going after Nick Valentine. And just to make things easy, I'm going to go ahead and break the stream. So, this explanation, if you didn't want to see it, it's too late. You've already seen it.